We are an entitled generation. We were raised very differently from other generations. One thing that's often forgotten is that Gen Xers and Millennials actually share the same parents, the boomers. Gen Xers were born were teenagers in the 80s, and their mothers were off at work, and so all of a sudden you had this new development of the latchkey child. What happened with Millennials, which I think is one of the biggest shifts that happened for them, is everyone was like, oh no, we can't have these kids coming home to houses that are empty. So what they actually did is they put in place a lot of structure, which is after-school programs, getting good grades, going to all of these activities, and all of a sudden you have a generation that's hyper-oriented towards success and tangible rewards and getting their praise because they've done that their entire life. But then they had this thing that happened to them, which is that they graduated into a recession. And all of a sudden, the thing that was supposed to be there, the big office, that big job that made a lot of sense, wasn't there for them. It just crumbled before them. And not only that, not only was their job not there for them, but their parents' jobs weren't there for their parents. And in fact, big institutions that they thought were going to survive forever just crumbled right before their eyes. And so there was an unease that hit them. But they're very optimistic. So what they did, instead of getting nervous about this, is they actually enacted a bunch of paradigm shifts that we're all still reacting to this. And they continued to move all of these different paradigms so that they still felt successful within their own life, even if it wasn't matching up to the roadmap that they had seen before. Because it's not that they're trying to escape, it's that they're constantly trying to learn. The reason that they're doing that is that they're really conservative, actually, as a generation. They're trying to check all of the boxes. Think about Gen Xers, they rebelled in a big way. Think about even boomers, they took to the streets. Millennials, on the other hand, have always kind of done what you told them to do. They don't want to disrupt the system, they want to optimize the system, actually. So millennials, being the conservative and optimistic generation that they are, they decided they would put all their bets into the only asset that they 100% know will exist in their future, themselves. And so they put a lot of their attention into building their personal brand.
I want to remind you that the millennials have a big other characteristic that I think dominates everything else, and that is that they're young. And young people have always been different. If you look in the data, I can think of 3 ways in which millennials are noticeably different from the generations that came before them. One of them is the rise of inequality. These kids are always going to be very bifurcated. I think that's very problematic, not for the types of people Maude has been talking about and analyzing, which has mostly been upper middle class millennials, but there's a whole group of people whose parents aren't in this room who, their millennials world is very different than ours, and it's going to be a bigger hole for them to climb out of. The second big thing that I think is different about the millennials is it's the best time ever to be a woman. And, I'm very bullish on the future of women in the labor market. As a labor economist, I can tell you the only thing that really matters, not the only thing, but the most important thing that predicts your success in the labor market is your education. So everything's tilting, 40 years of tilting towards the women. The third factor that the millennials are dealing with from a labor market perspective, as Maude mentioned, is they came out they came out of school. Many of them came out of college during the Great Recession. So I'm not that worried about the millennials because, the recession was bad, but after a few years, they'll mostly catch up after 10 years, and the scars are not going to be that great if you look at the numbers. I'm really worried about the millennials in Greece and Spain. So there you're just like this whole idea of a lost generation. It's pretty dramatic.
In the top 3 items when I Googled millennials this morning, one of them was, believe it or not, a report by the Council on Economic Advisors about millennials with 14 facts about millennials.
You see what is working and communicating right now? It's BuzzFeed. It's image-based, it's conversational, it's stories, it's information that you can use as social currency when you're out with your friends or your family. It's an attention-based economy, and the government has to know that they're part of that. They don't automatically get the attention, they have to earn it. In general, I think millennials, just like everybody else, want to be valued.